All right, we're going to keep working with sine and cosine, but we're going to add some transformations, more so than the period change and the amplitude change. So we're going to talk about phase shifts and vertical shifts. So phase shifts are going to shift horizontally And the one thing you want to pay attention to when you're looking for a phase shift, it is something that's being added or subtracted to x inside the argument for the trig function, okay? Your vertical shifts are literally going to shift vertically, so it's going to move you up and down. And those are things that are being added or subtracted to the entire function, okay? So we're still going to have period changes. We're still going to have amplitude changes. We want to look at how this all affects everything else. So I'm going to do the same thing I did in the last video. I'm going to do 2 videos. So I'll do the odd problems and the even problems. Let's do odd problems right now. So problem number 1, I'm going to identify 4 key characteristics. And it doesn't matter where you put it. So I'll just put it off to the left here. We've got amplitude and period, and then we have phase shift and vertical shift, okay? So those are our 4 key characteristics. The other thing you'd want to always add to this list is if you have any kind of reflection over the x-axis or reflection over the y-axis, you want to make sure you include that as well, okay? But that would just be a separate little comment to yourself. So for this particular problem, our amplitude is going to be 3, all right? We have, and if we look at x here, there is no coefficient of x, so our period is the standard 2 pi period. Phase shift, in this case we have a phase shift. We're adding something to x, which is a little bit weird because what's really going to happen here is we're going to shift left pi units. Now, yes, I know it looks like it says x plus pi, but what's really happening when you do transformations with x, it's opposite of what you think it would be. So what you really want to think about is what would it take for you to get back to 0? And that would be negative pi or moving to the left pi spaces. There's nothing added here to the function, so vertical shift, you don't have one, so I just write none. Now, there's a bunch of different ways to do this. If you can keep track of all of this in your head, go for it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and label the x-axis. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, you don't want to go all the way to the end because you want to keep your graph even and your intervals even. So I'm going to label the 4th one 2 pi. And I'm going to do the same thing we've been doing. Half of that's pi, pi over 2, 3 pi over 2. Okay. I also want to label the y-axis. My amplitude's 3. So 1, 2, 3. Whoops. Sorry about that. Apparently I need to plug my Apple Pencil in. And 1, 2, negative 3 there. Now, one of the things that I've done, what I'll do is I will actually graph my function with just the amplitude and the period, and then I will shift it once I've graphed the initial one. Now, I don't do the full graph. I literally just do little X marks the spots and then shift those over. So sine function, you would have your first point at 0. So here's 0. I'm going to put a little X there. Pi over 2, I would go all the way up to 3, back down to 0 at pi. 3 pi over 2 would go to the minimum of negative 3, and then back to 2 pi. Okay? Now, I want to take these and shift each one of these 5 points to the left. Now, how far to the left? Well, it's supposed to be pi units. Well, pi units is 2 spaces. So if you want to, you could make a little note here. In this case, it's 2 2 spaces. Now that won't always be the case because it's going to depend on the period of your function, how far you have to shift it. But I'm going to take this point right here and shove it to the left 2 spaces. That's pi units. I'm going to take this point, move it to the left 2 spaces. Let's see, this one's going to move to the left 2 spaces. 2 spaces and 2 spaces here. And that's the curve I'm going to connect. That's 1 full cycle. Now, one thing we're missing here is because we did shift to the left, we also need to label these points on the x-axis. Just if you think about your number line, everything that's on the right is mirrored on the left. It's just negative. So this is going to be negative pi over 2, and this would be negative pi. All right, so that's problem number 1. And I'm going to keep going and make sure we'll see if my Apple Pencil survives this one. All right, so that's problem number 1. Let's go ahead and slide on down to number 3 here. All right, so off to the side, I'm going to list my key characteristics. So amplitude is 1. Period is, well, period in this case is going to be 2 pi divided by 4, right? We've got this coefficient of 4 sitting here. So that's going to be, what would that be? Pi over 2. So those are what I'm going to graph originally. Phase shift, there is nothing being added or subtracted to x, so phase shift is none. And vertical shift, these are straightforward. If it says -3, we're moving down 3 units, okay? All right, however, there's one extra piece that I want to take care of. Let me do a quick, so that's the vertical shift. And then the one other thing, there's a negative sitting there, so that's going to reflect everything over the x-axis. All right, so I'm actually going to do the amplitude, period, and reflection all at once. I think I can do that. So I'm going to come over here to my graph. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this would be pi over 2. Hack that in half, pi over 4. Hack that in half, pi over 8. So 3 pi over 8. This is a place where you might, because the graph is so small, you might want to put your numbers across the bottom. Just make sure that you can read them, I can read them. It's all good. All right, so this is a sine curve. And I'll label 0 there. All right, so sine curve. And I'm going to do a little x marks the spot here. So I would start at 0. The reflection over the x-axis would push me down to -1, back to 0, up to +1, back to 0. All right. So there's my little X marks the spots, and I did realize I forgot to label the y-axis, so let me go ahead and put a 1 and a -1 there. Now, every single one of these little x's, every single one of those little points, I'm going to have to move down 3 units. So if you can keep track of that in your head all at the same time, like, you go for it. 1, 2, 3, there we go. There we go. All right, so there's the 1 cycle of the curve. The one thing that I would like you to do is to just finish labeling the y-axis so I can see the minimums and maximums, and you can as well. All right, so that's problem number 3. I'm going to go ahead and slide down to number 5 here. Let's see what fun we have. Okay, so we've got lots of stuff going on here. We have the negative. We have that 3. We have a 1/2 in front of x, and we have a -2. Lots of stuff going on here. So amplitude 3, period. Well, whatever 2 pi divided by 1/2 is, so times by 2, that's going to be 4 pi. Now, phase shift, there is nothing being added directly to x, so there's none. However, vertical shift, you are moving everything down 2, and the thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that negative, so let's go ahead and say this is a reflection, or reflect over x-axis. I don't need paragraphs or even like complete sentences here. This is a notes to yourself so you can make sure you can graph this thing. All right, so let's go ahead and label the x-axis. 1, 2, 3. The fourth one out is going to be 4 pi. That's going to be, whoops, not 2. That's 2 pi, and then 3 pi. Y-axis, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, -3. Okay. I am going to do this in pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and do the X marks the spot first. So cosine starts off center high normally. In this case, because the reflection over the x-axis is going to start off center and low. So we're going to start at -3, go to the midline of 0, up to +3, midline back down to -3. Now, we're not shifting horizontally, that would be the phase shift, but every single one of these points now needs to shift down 2 units. So down to here, down to here, down 2, down 2, and down 2. So the curve would look something like that. Last thing to do would be just to finish out the minimum here would be -5, and the maximum here would be +1. All right, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and close this video out. We're looking at a lot of combinations, so if you're having any issues with these, please let me know so we can help you out. Thank you so much.